Hi, on this video, I'm going to talk about the higher order questioning activity. Basically, it's very simple. You're supposed to create 5 questions for another student to answer, like you are a teacher who's coming up with some test questions. The only rule is at least 3 questions must be above the knowledge or comprehension level. And I'll explain what that is in a second here. Then you're also supposed to create your own solutions for the questions. In other words, you answer those questions on a separate place. Then you send those materials to your teacher, who then will give your questions to a different student. And then you guys trade questions. They do the same thing. They give you questions, you give them questions. And then you answer the questions that the other student prepared. Finally, you send the questions back to the original student for them to grade your answers based on their answer key. That's it. Now, you can do this virtually as well through Google Docs. The first student creates the first question in a Google Doc, and in a separate doc, they have their answers, so that doesn't get shared with the other student, but both docs get shared with the teacher. Then once the teacher shares the doc with the second student, the second student will then answer the questions, and when they're done, they can put a comment like this. You can just highlight and tag a comment with the email of the first student, something like this, right? And when you do this, it will send a message to the student, I'm done, please grade it. And then the original student that came up with the questions can come back in and give the person feedback with comments, like tag their document and tell them like how they did on each of the questions according to them. Meanwhile, that student is answering the other student's questions and vice versa, right? So it's a act like a teacher in trade kind of activity. But creating good questions isn't easy, all right? And that's what the challenge of the activity is. There are different kinds of questions. You have knowledge questions, which are questions that ask you to like list, tell, describe, locate, write, state, name, remember, right? These are questions like what, when, where, what happened, how many, who was, right? Factual questions. Comprehension questions ask you to explain, interpret, discuss, restate, translate, describe, organize something, or something. So something like, can you write it in your own words? Or what is the main topic? Or can you retell the main idea of? Can you summarize this? So let's give you some examples of these first level questions. Let's say you're learning about cells. So a knowledge question could be something like, can you name 10 organelles from inside a cell? Or an explain question would be, can you explain what the role of the Golgi apparatus is on the cell? Right. So these are examples of questions that hit those first 2 levels. You can only have 2 out of the 5 questions be at that level. The rest have to be above. So application. That asks you to solve, show, illustrate, construct, examine, right? Calculate, complete, compute, produce something, act, modify something, right? So an example could be this. What is the significance of the mitochondria for the cell? How is the mitochondria and the chloroplast related to each other? In what ways they are similar to each other? What is an example of an organelle doing its job, right? So these are actually asking you to apply the information, right? Or something like, what would happen if a cell lost its mitochondria, right? So this is an example of those kinds of application questions. Analysis questions actually to examine, investigate, categorize, separate, classify information. So an example could be uh, classify organelles between the ones that have membranes and the ones that don't have membranes and explain how they act different from each other. How is a mitochondria similar to a chloroplast? How are they different from a chloroplast? Create a graph to represent a relationship. What is the pattern that you see in a graph, in a certain graph? What is the proper order of a certain events? Right? So this is kind of like getting data and putting it together or comparing the data is how you analyze. Evaluate questions is have to do with judging, prioritizing, arguing, choosing, deciding, giving an opinion, making conclusions, decide the importance or the value of something, right? So again, it could be somewhat like an evaluation question to ask, like, what is the importance of the mitochondria for the cell, or what organelle is the most important one, or defend a position about what organelle a cell could not live without, um, or choose between the following three organelles as the most important and justify your answer, right? These are examples of what could be like an evaluation question. What is your opinion about something? Last level is synthesis. That's when you create, invent, compose, construct, design, formulate, combine different ideas into a new idea, right? So again, I kind of already said there's something similar to this in a different level when I said hypothesize what would happen if a cell will lose the mitochondria, right? Or write a song about the cell, or write a poem about the cell. What would happen to a cell if a plant cell if it lost its chloroplast, or what would happen to an animal cell if it suddenly had chloroplast on it? Or look at this data. What does this data infer? What can you say that is true based on this data? What ideas could you add? In what way would you make a cell better? So these are some examples of synthesis questions. So what this document does for you is give you ideas on how to create those questions because it has a prompts, right? So you can pick up a sentence stem and then transform that to any given concept. So I will give you an example, right? Um, let's look at a analysis question and say, let's pick a prompt. Let's see, what is the proper order of, right? And so you can list the levels of organization of life and ask the person to put those levels in order. You could do the steps on a food chain and ask them to put that in order. You could put the steps in a cell cycle and ask them to put that in order, right? So you see, you can apply the same prompt to any topic in biology, so or whatever class you're doing this in for science class. So the idea is you can use these prompts to your advantage. These are also ideas here on different kinds of activities, which are kind of hit this because I also prepared this document for teachers to have ideas on how to hit the different levels with activities in their class. So that is basically how that works. You have to try to create questions which try to get deeper into the levels of thinking. So you're not just recalling, right? Or explaining things. You're trying to strategize or extend your thinking into higher levels of thinking. And when you do that, you force the person to actually learn better and learn deeper and learn in different contexts as well. So this is an activity that you can always choose to do. And if you want to do it for the first time, just talk to me about it and I'll help you through it for the first time you do it.